Hello, my name is Xander. Welcome back to the Discord QuizBot with Python tutorial series. This tutorial follows on from the previous tutorial, part 1. You can go ahead and follow this tutorial. I'm going to go through the whole process of downloading the previous code and getting it started and then moving it on. But it might be more beneficial if you are thinking about building a Discord QuizBot to move over to the first part first and then come back to the second part once you've finished the first tutorial. In this tutorial, we just move things forward from the first tutorial in that we now try to capture the user's answers and as well as the amount of points that's associated to that question the user has answered. And then we're going to try and send that across to the API, our Django API, and then build a high score list. So this tutorial is designed for beginners of Django and Python. So the practices and how I lay out some of the code might not be as efficient as it could be, but I try and put things in a way that's easy to understand to begin with. And maybe as the tutorial series moves along, we'll slowly move towards utilizing classes in Python instead of functions. And then we'll just tidy up the code and refactor as we go along. So like I've already said, it would be beneficial for you to have seen the first tutorial before you start this tutorial. So this tutorial is going to be a 3-part tutorial. First of all, I need to recreate a new bot for my channel because I deleted the old one. And then I'll go ahead and in Django, we're going to build a new database table to store all the users and the amount of points that they have. And then we go ahead and have a look at the bot code so that we can capture and then send the data, the user's answers and the quiz question points to our backend, our API, our Django API, so that it records the answers. So what we're going to end up with is that when users answer questions, the points that are associated to the question that they've answered correctly will get updated in the database. And at any point in time, the user can have a look at the top 10 list, say, of users and the amount of points that they've gained. So it'll be a high score list. So there should be a link in the description that's going to take you over to the Discord QuizBot project homepage on GitHub. From here, you're going to find the different parts that we go through. So far, we've covered part 1. So there's a bit of information down here. You'll be able to then access, for example, the information about part 1, what we're going to cover, etc. So I'll keep updating that as we go along. Now, in addition to that, I will take any comments or suggestions for features that you want to see in this project. So go ahead and do that and add a comment in the video description. Sorry, not in the video description. Put a comment in the video comment section. So right, let's go ahead and just download part 1. So I'm just going to extract that. You can't see that, but I'm going to extract that to my desktop. And I've now got a new folder. I'm just going to name that folder to the letter B. So what I should have now, apologies, I know you can't see that. So what you should have is this right here. So now we can open up our Visual Studio Code Editor. Let's just go ahead and open up that folder. Okay, so once you've opened up that folder, you can see it on the left-hand side here. So these are all the files that we're utilizing from the first tutorial. Now, it's inside of a folder. We need to be careful of that. So let's go back here actually. So what we're not going to need is this stuff here, right? So let's just get rid of that. Let's just bring it out of this folder. It's preference, but I'm just going to bring everything out into one folder here. So everything's on the same folder structure that was inside of that folder that you just saw. So that's our whole project. So let's go ahead now and just create a new bot if you haven't already in Discord. And if you have, just skip to the next section. I deleted mine from the previous tutorial, so I'm just going to rebuild it again, take you through that if you haven't got one, and then I'll meet the people who do have one in the next section. Otherwise, stay on. Let's do that now. So before we forget, in actual fact, we're going to need to set up our environment. So run the py space -m space venv. That's a virtual environment tool, and then a folder called venv, which you can change. Then you need to go into that folder and activate it, so it then appears here on the left-hand side. Now we're working with inside of that environment folder or that virtual environment. So what we need to do now is pip install -r and then the requirements. So inside of this text is all the packages that are going to be needed to run our application. So we just need to run that That might take a couple of seconds to run. Now, in the rest of the presentation here, you might not see venv because I was working locally. So just ignore that. Just make sure you're inside of this virtual environment area, this venv, while you undertake all the tasks now inside of this tutorial. So to build a Discord bot, if you haven't already got one, let's go over to the Discord developers page. It's probably going to take you to a documentation. You need to select the application, and then let's build a new application. We're just going to call this quiz bot. So once we've done that, we just need to go over to bot here and then add a bot. So that's pretty much all we need to do there at that point. Now we're going to need this token, so it's worth just copying that. So click to reveal token. Let's go ahead and just copy this token. So I'm just going to put that into a new text file. Okay, so I've done that. Obviously you can't see that, but I've done that. So let's go over to this here. What we're going to need to do here is select bot and then give it some permissions. So these are the permissions that the bot needs in your channel. So we give it some permissions. We've got a nice little link here. So what we can now do is just copy that, and then let's go over to a new page, type that in, and then we're just going to select our server. We want the bot to appearing, press continue, and then these are all the permissions it's going to have. Authorize, and human. There we go. So your bot is now ready in the channel. So I'm going to go ahead and make a channel, a separate channel for this bot. So let's go ahead and do that. So I've gone ahead and created a new bot test channel. I've made it private. So what I need to do after that is just go to permissions and then just make sure I add a new role, which is going to be the bot. There we go. So that should be that. So the bot should now appear. Now it's offline at the moment because we haven't activated it. So let's go now back to our code. Let's go ahead now and think about building the back end first so that we can save the data that we're sending across. So we want to save, in this case, the username and the amount of points that's associated to the question the user has just answered. So our project at the moment is all in this QuizBot folder here. We made an app in the previous tutorial where we created a model. We've then added our questions to that and so on. So that was our previous app we've built. So let's go ahead now and build a new app for the scores. So I'm going to change directory into that QuizBot folder, and then I'm going to run the Django admin command. And then I'm just going to start app. So we're going to call this new app score. So I'm separating the logic here from the score and the actual quiz. So it just allows me to break up the application into smaller chunks. So I know where the code is for individual components or features of my application. So that's going to create a new project folder called score. So let's now go into here. So we're going to need to create a model. So let's just bring that down. So this is going to be a new table in our database where we're going to store the username and the amount of points that they have. So the idea is that we're going to store the amount of points associated to the question that they've answered. Now, obviously, every time they answer a question, the number in the database needs to increase. So we need to add on the number that's associated to the question that they've answered to the existing data that's in the database. So that's one kind of thing that we're going to need to do to perform to update the database. But let's go ahead now and just build a simple database for this. Okay, sorry, I meant table. So let's go ahead and import our model. So we've got this, so that allows us to build tables. And later on, we might have some translation support. So let's just bring that in straight away. Right, so we're going to build a new table. If you remember from the previous tutorial, that just means making a new class extending from models. And now what we're going to do is we need some fields. So let's go for a character field. We're going to call this name. I'll press tab again, and then max length 255. So that little shortcut you saw there was only possible because of some of the plugins that I have. So I'm running the Django plugin. I'm running the Python plugin, for example. So those two plugins are probably going to be essential for that. Now, in addition to that, I'm also going to showcase SQLite because we're going to have a look at the database, which is an SQLite database at the moment. So I've also downloaded this extension too. So just type in these extensions here at the top, get them downloaded, and you can do exactly what I just did there to quickly build this field. Right, so we've got the name, and we've given it a max length of 255. Probably not needed here. Most names are probably less than 100 characters, right? But you can change that as you need. So points is going to be an integer field. So I'm going to set this up as an integer field. However, you know, once the points get so large, it's probably going to need to turn into maybe a big int. Depends on the scoring system you have. What you need to be careful of here is how many numbers, or what's the biggest number you can store within this field. So this is a data type. This refers to a data type. That data type will have boundaries. In this case, it needs to be a number. So we're defining that this field must store a number. It must be an integer. So let's have a look at that. So we can see from the documentation here in Django that the integer field holds values from quite large to quite big. So we're probably pretty safe. As long as we don't want to store a number bigger than this, we can use an integer field. If we did, then there are other fields that we might want to use. So for example, you've got the big int, I think is up the top here somewhere. So we've got the integer field, we've got the big integer field, so that's just a bigger number. And we've also got the auto big field as well. So this kind of just introduces you to the different types of fields or field types that you might want to include in your project. So we're going to finish that off with the name points and then just a dunderstring method like we've done before. So the default return is going to be the name of the item that we return from the database. If we return a single item from score, or in the admin section, we're going to see the data referred to by the name. So now we've done that, let's go ahead to the settings. Let's make sure that we import it into our installed apps. So let's add our new app to the import apps. Now that we've got the model in place, let's go ahead now and make migrations. So run this command. I've already done this, so it's not going to work. Oh, it is going to work, sorry. I haven't done it. So make migrations, that's going to create the table, the score table, and let's then migrate. That's going to apply it then into the database. So actually apply it. So a two-step process there. Now it's actually inside of our database. It's been applied into a database. I've got that extension I mentioned here before, SQLite. That enables me to have a look in the database. So I can right click, open the database, have a look at the database inside of it. I can see by looking through the tables, I've got a table here called score. There's nothing in it at the moment. If I show the table, there's nothing there. But for example, if there was, if I showed a different table, this is the questions, you can see the data in the database. Right, so I think we've established we've now got the table in the database. So let's now go ahead and just drop that back down. Okay, so in the score and the admin, now what we're going to do, like we did previously, is just register our table in the admin so we can add some data or just see the data in our new table. So here we're going to import the model through dot, remember this directory models. Inside of models, we've got the score class, our table, score table. And then here I'm just identifying what I want to list in the admin area. So let's go ahead and run server. Let's just check this out. So here we are. So just refresh. So to log in, remember that's admin, username admin, password admin. If you followed from the previous tutorial, if you're using this code base that we downloaded. So you can now see the scores. So let's go into the scores and we can add a score. So name and points. There we go. So that's what we're going to capture from Discord. When a user types in a correct score, we're going to capture their name and the points and then add the tally as we go along. So, or tally up the points as we go along. So delete that, we don't need that. Right, so now we've done that, what we're going to need is a way or a method of our bot, our Discord bot, to actually send the data to be then entered here into the database. So we're going to need to set up that pathway. So again, like we did in the previous tutorial, we're going to create a new URL. Now we are going to do that on a kind of project-wide level. So come out of the score, go into the quiz bot here in the URLs. So like we've done here, we're going to create a new path, a way of a pointer or an endpoint for the bot to point towards in order to send the data to our system so we can capture the data and store it in our database. So let's go ahead now and just add a new URL. So I'm just going to copy this in. So we're going to create a new path. That's going to be the URL we're going to point towards. Now we're going to create a new view in a minute called update scores. And I'm just giving this the name of update scores. Right, so that's a new URL where we can point our bot towards. Like we did random to collect data, this is going to be utilized to send data to our system. So we're going to need to bring in score, our views that we haven't built yet. So remember, this is relative, so URLs dot score inside of here dot views. So we're going to need to make a new view called update scores now and connect this URL to our view, our logic here. Right, so inside of our views and scores, let's now think about building this up. Right, so we're going to be utilizing the API view again, just because then we can see it in on our screen. We can actually view it in our browser, sorry. So let's create a new class. Let's call this update scores. We're going to bring in API view. So this is class-based views. So behind the scenes, this has lots of features that we can utilize within our class here to make it quicker and easier for us to develop. It is a little bit abstract because you're not knowing exactly what this does. You don't know if you've not used this before, but it's meant to be utilized to quickly build something without having to worry about describing or programming the basic things that you would do in order to kind of build this type of functionality. So what we want to do here, in the previous tutorial, we used a function called get, right? So that allowed us to capture the get request. So when we sent a request to our API from our bot for a question, we send a get request. Now what we want to do, when we send data to our system, our API here, we're going to send it as a post request. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set up this post function here, and this is going to override essentially and be utilized whenever we send data to this URL, which passes it across to our view here. So we're going to deal with the post data now. So we need to bring in self and we need to bring in the request from the user, from the bot. And then let's just set format equals, format equals none. So these are type of parameters that you can take a look up. They don't really have any special meaning that's worth noting at this point. So the most important thing here is for beginners just to understand this request idea. So the user has sent a request. We're going to capture that information now. As long as it's a post request, which it should be from the bot, because we want to post some data into our database, say, we're going to capture that request and bring that in. So when the user sends, or when the bot sends data to our API, that's going to be, all the data is going to be restored in the request. So we bring the request into the function so that we can capture that information and save it to the database. Right, so let's go ahead now and build our serializer. So we're going to need a new serializer for this. So let's bring in from serializers, import score serializer, which hasn't been built yet. So let's go into our score, new file serializer.py. So in here, we're going to basically describe the type of data we want to store into the database. So we're going to prepare the data from our API so it can then be inserted into a database. This is why we're essentially building this serializer here. So let's go into our serializer. And what we're going to need to do here is import our serializer. We're going to need our model because we're going to need to know where the data is coming from, where we want to store it, and so on. And then we're going to set up some meta. So here we're basically just describing in this model that we set up what data it is we want to work with. So let's just bring this back. So we want to use the, I need to also set out a class, don't I, called score serializer. So here what I'm doing is I'm just defining the fact I want to use a score model, and these are the fields from that model I want to utilize. So the data comes in from our API, it gets serialized. So we check the data that's been sent from our bot against the serializer to check to see if the data fits. It's going to be utilized, and then we can then obviously convert that data in a format that can then be saved into the database. So there's our model serializer, right? So let's just tab this across. There we go. Right, so that deals with that. So we brought that serializer in. Let's get rid of all this stuff here. So we bring that serializer into our view, and now what we can do is we can collect the data from the bot. So from the request, remember the request data comes in, we're going to get the data. That's going to be, in this case, the data is going to say something like the username, name equals whatever the username is of the person who got the question right, and then the amount of points that the question is worth. Right, so now we've got that data, what we want to do is we want to check to see if it's valid. So let's check it against our kind of serializer here. So if serializer is valid, then we've got data what we want to work with. So now we know that it's valid. So let's go ahead now and do something with the data. Right, so there's two items here that we want to store in the database, the name and the points. So just to make that super clear, let's just go in and actually create two new variables here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the data that's been sent across. So we do that by serializer, then validated data. The data's been validated. So we need to use serializer validated data, and then the data that's been sent, we refer to that as, or we capture that in name here, and I'm going to store it in this variable here called name. And we do the same thing with the points. So those are the two things that we're sending from our bot over and capturing. So now we've done that, we can now run an if statement, say, against it. Because what we want to do now is remember that if a user has answered a question correctly, their name and the amount of points will be entered into a database. If their name doesn't exist in the database, it's just going to be entered. But if the name does exist, what we want to do is we want to get their details, their name and how many points they have, and we want to update the amount of points they have. So remember, when they answer multiple questions have multiple points values attached to them. So we're just trying to update the record in the database so that it equates to the amount of points that the user has accumulated from answering all the correct questions. So let's create a simple if statement here. So score dot objects. So score is the table, objects, the default object manager, filter, name equals name. So here I'm going to run a simple query to find in my score table anywhere where the name of the user equals the name that's been sent across. So if a name exists already, it's going to get that name. So I'm going to check to see if it exists. That's the first thing I'm going to do. So I'm going to make this a little bit long-winded, but it gives you an idea of like the procedure that needs to kind of take place here. So that's that done. Now notice that I haven't brought in the model yet. So I'm going to need to bring in the model. So from .models, bring in score. So my model's here, my table. So that allows me to access it and check against the name. Right, so now I've checked if the user does exist. Now, if the user does exist, then it's going to continue. So this if statement is going to then come inside of here and be read. So what I'm going to now do is say is serializer equals score dot objects dot get. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the object in the database where the name equals the name. So I get the object from the database and then I'm going to update it and save it. Now I could do this all in one procedure, but I'm just going to separate these steps. So I get the data from the database. Now I'm going to update this. So serializer.points. So what's happened now is I've got the data from the database object. It's now in serializer. I'm now going into that object and looking for the points field. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to update it. So I'm going to use F here, which is a special Django feature that's going to allow me to access, let's just say it's going to allow me to access the points field, and then I'm going to plus the points. So what's happening here then? So I'm basically just going to look for the points field. Okay, and then I'm going to basically take the data that's in there. So for example, if a user already has 10 points, I'm now going to add that to the new value that's been sent across. Remember here, I've captured the amount of points that particular question is worth. The user has answered correctly. And now I'm just going to add those together. And once I've done that, obviously I just need to save it. So serializer.save. So notice that I've done this outside of this if statement here. Okay, because if this doesn't match, I'm just going to save the data. So here all I've done is I've basically made a match against a database. I'm going to prepare that new serializer data to update the points, and then we're going to save it. If this is false, if the user doesn't exist, it's just going to save the data. So that's it. That's pretty much the logic we've got here. So what I can now do is I can just send a response. So let's go ahead and do that. So basically here, I'm going to respond. If the data is saved, the response is going to be none. I'm just going to send the status HTTP 201 created. So I don't really need to send anything back to the bot. I'm just doing this just to showcase we can send something back. So we've got this response here, and then also let's bring in the status. Okay, so we're just utilizing some of the tools here to send kind of a response back. Right, obviously, if the serializer isn't valid, if we follow this down, you can see it's connected to this return here, where we send back a 400 bad request status. Okay, so two statuses is going to be returned, either HTTP 201 created, all good, or if it fails here, if this statement isn't true, if the data isn't valid, it's just going to return a 400 bad request. Right, so that's it. That's our that's all the logic really that we're going to need there. So now we've done that, we should now be prepared and ready to actually receive data from our bot. So let's go ahead and test this. Right, so the server's on. That's the first thing we need to do. Let's just double check our URL. So it's API score update. Now I've got a piece of software here called Postman. This is a piece of software that allows me to check and test APIs. I can send data and so on. So here, for example, let's just start again. Okay, so let's just grab that because I think that's correct. So when you load this up, just go ahead and press plus here. Now we need to define the URL. So this is score update here. And here we need to go into the body and let's just send some form data. So one name, that's the first data we're going to send. So test, and then this is going to be value. Or it might be score. I think it might be value. Probably score. But let's just double check that. So the data and serializer is points. So it's points. So points and one. So this is the data that I'm going to send to this endpoint here. So I press send, and you can see here method get not allowed because I've not defined the method. Just pointing that out. So this time we're sending a post. Okay. So now we're sending a post. Let's send. There we go. Right. So hopefully at this point, so we didn't get a reply there. So that's because I set to none. Remember. So let's go back into our server here. We just refresh. There we go. So you can see I've just refreshed this and the data now is inserted into our table. So that's a good indication that our endpoint is working and it will accept the data and insert it into our database because there's no point moving on until that's working. So now what we need to do then is actually now set this up in our bot. So let's go down to our bot here. Let's have a look to see what we've got so far. So all that we're doing at the moment is we've got a function here to get the question. Now this is going to be slightly incorrect. So what I'm going to do now, just for now, is I'm just going to set this up with the local host. So we're going to work from localhost to begin with, and then get that working. Then we'll migrate it to Heroku like we did in the previous tutorial. So that's where we're going to get data from. So this client here is out of date. So we're going to need to update that. So I saved this earlier, if you remember. So if you've forgotten that, you just need to go into developers portal, OAuth2 bot, reveal the token here, get the token again from the bot. Right, so let's go back. So I'm going to put that there. Don't forget the singles or doubles. So that's that done. Right, so that's updated. So we may as well just test this first, right, to see if it's working. There's no point going any further. So what I'll do is I'll turn the server on in number 1 here. I'll add a new terminal, and then I'll run the bot from here. So let's go ahead now and run the bot. So py and then bot.py. So that's going to start the bot. So what we should be able to do now is go back into our Discord channel. So if we can do this. So our bot has been turned on. So if you remember from the first tutorial, we should be able to type in question, and that then should return a question. So it looks like there might be a problem. So let's go back into our code here. So you can see that there's an exception here. It looks like maybe we've got the wrong host. Maybe that could be the problem. So let's go back in. I think we've got the wrong port connected. So in our bot up the top here, because I changed it, didn't I, there? So we need to make sure that we're running the right port. So we'll save that. Now you need to close the bot, open up the bot again. So up on the keyboard to bring up the previous command. Control C to close it. Remember, Control C to close, up to reveal the previous command. Let's go back into our bot here. So we're just going to run question again. Seem to still have a problem. Okay. So this time, HTTP connection pool host equals port max retries exceeded with URL. Okay, so there seems to be an issue here. Now, what we can do here is we can just test. So let's just copy this. Let's go back into Postman if you have this. So you can see that, let's do that. Now we don't need any form data here. This is to retrieve data, remember. So let's just send that. So you can see that, yeah, there looks like there is a problem to actually get data from our API from this URL here. So let's think about some things that we need to think about. So let's go into our other command prompt here, and you'll notice that Django is not actually turned on. So that's probably one of the most common issues, right? So let's just run our server. Now remember, I'm using 2 tabs here, one for running the bot, one for running Django. So let's run our server now. Let's try that again in Postman. You can now see that what it says post, I need to get, send, and we're now receiving the data back. So it's probably confident now. I feel confident that this is going to work. So I'll go back to my bot. I press Control and C to close it, run the bot again. Let's go back into here, run the question again. That should now give us a question. We're answering the question. Sorry it took too long. God, I might need to, there we go, you're right. There we go. So it's working okay. So now we can extend this. So then let's create a new function here. This function is going to be called update score. Okay, so what we're going to need to do is we need to pass in the user and the points. Okay, so we're going to need 2 things here, user and points. We're going to pass that into this function. And then what we're going to do then is we're basically just going to set up a URL. So we know where the URL is, where we want to send this data, right? So that's our endpoint here, API score update. So at the moment, we're just using localhost. We'll swap over when we go to Heroku. So what we're going to need to do now is capture the data that we want to send across. We're going to get that here, the parameters here we passed in. So we're going to pass in the user and points, and we're going to put them right there. So here we're constructing our data that we want to send across to our API. And now all we need to do is just send it across. Okay, so that will just send it across nicely. I guess we could just, for now, just say return. Right, so looks though maybe there's some, okay, I've forgotten semicolon. Right, so that's going to organize sending the data across. We're passing the data to this function, user and points. That's going to capture that, prepare the data to be sent across, and then essentially we're going to get the URL, data equals new score, this data, and then we're just basically sending it across. So it might be that we store that and utilize that another time. We've just set it up that way for now. Right, so that will send the data across. So let's now think about how we're actually going to send the data. So it's called update score. So let's go down here. So let's think what's happening here. So what we do is we set up a new question. So we say in the chat question, that's going to start this, that's going to be detected by our bot, and then it's going to run this code here. So we get a question. We then send the question to the chat channel. That's what we've been doing. And then what we're doing here is essentially we're going to, we're waiting for a new message from the client. And what we're going to do is we're going to check that to make sure. So we're going to bring over this function here. We're going to check to make sure that if a user, now in this case, this is only set up, you may have noticed this from the first tutorial. This is only going to work at the moment. It's worth pointing this out. If I go back here, if you were trying to get someone else to answer your question, they can't do it. You're the only person at the moment that can answer your question. So when you type in question, $question, it gives you a question. You're the only person who can answer it at the moment. So that's important to understand. I forgot to mention that in the previous tutorials. Yeah. So basically we're going to do a check. We're going to ask for a question is going to appear. Then when a user types in something, we're going to basically check to make sure if it is a digit, if they've typed in a digit, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, then we're going to perform an action. So if guess content equals answer, we're going to check to see if it's the answer. It's going to say you're right. Else, if it's not right, it's going to say, oops, you're not right. So here is basically just checking to make sure that the user has answered within a time frame, 10 seconds. Right, so this is just basically checking to see if the user has answered. If the user answers, if the content of that guess equals the answer, then basically it's going to say you're right, otherwise it's going to say you're wrong. So what we want to do here then, if they are right, we want to update the scores. So it makes sense if, for example, we now run our function right here. So let's do exactly that. So we're going to run our function here. What we're going to do to begin with is just we're going to set the points manually and the username. So let's call this test user and let's give it a point of say 10. So we're just going to set the data up manually to begin with. So what's going to happen is when the user answers correctly, it's going to update the score. It's going to call that function and then update the score. Now, we are meant to be passing in 2 parameters here. So let's just get rid of that for now. So there we go. So let's test this out first. So let's just close that. Let's just run the bot again. So we're running the bot again. Let's go back in. So, oh, I can't see it. I'm just going to guess. Okay, so I'm right. Okay, so let's go back into the code. So it doesn't look like there's any problems. So what we can do now is just double check the database. So I refresh the database. You can now see it says test user and 10 points. So clearly what we've learned so far is that it is working. The way it's set up, the bot is sending the data is being sent and so on. So let's just go back and type in the user and points and then revert back here because we want to pass this data in so it's captured and sent across. Okay, so I'll revert that back. Right, so down here, we need to do some things here. Okay, so let's first of all get the author because we want to set up a message, right? So user equals guest.author. So we're going to get the information about the author. Cool. Right, so with Discord, what you'll find is that there are multiple people with the same username, right? And how Discord manages that is that if someone called Bob utilizes the username Bob, that's Bob, right? So if someone else starts to utilize Bob, you now become Bob hashtag 0001 all the way up to hashtag 9999. Right, so it allows up to 1,000 bobs on the system, and then you need to call yourself something else. So in actual fact, this author will say the username Bob, hashtag, and whatever number that user is. So what we want to do is we want to set up a kind of we want to set up a better message than just you are right. So what we're going to do here is we're going to set up this variable. So string guess author, and then we're going to get the name. So inside of this data, if you were to print it out, so if we did a print of user and then run this and had a look, you'll see all the data inside of it. All right, so guess the author name, and then plus, you've got it right, string the amount of points. Now, where does points come from? That's a good question. So if we look up here, what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to set up points in a second. I've not done that yet. So it's going to say, you're right, points plus points. So it's going to tell you how many points you kind of got awarded. All right, so that's the message. So this is the concatenation plus. So here's important if you're new, plus, and then you've got like the semis here. So this is all strings plus a string. So I've converted this into a string so I can utilize it here. And then concatenation, and then notice I'm using spaces as well because it's recognizing those spaces as spaces in the string that I want to appear when it prints out. So with that in place, we now put this inside of here. That's what's going to be printed out. So that's now that sorted. Now this is just one way of doing that. I've just shown you this way. For now, it's not very Python to do it this way. So now we've done that, so let's now take this. So far we've captured the user. We've utilized this to prepare a new string to output to the message. They're right. Cool. So now we've done that, we can now update the score. So let's go ahead and update the score. What do I want to update? I want to update the user. Now we're storing user here. This is why we're storing user. We're going to pass that over to our function to send to our database, to our API. And I also want to send the points. Right, so at the moment, points isn't really appearing anywhere. Right, so I need to collect the points now from my question. So far, what's happened up here, when we collected the data, all we've done is we've collected the title and we've looped through all the answers. So what we also need to do now is collect the points. So the points is going to be in the original data, because remember we're only gathering one question, so we can grab it from there. So after here, what we can do is let's put it here. So points equals JSON data. That's the data that gets returned. So remember we convert it. So now all the data is here in this variable. So inside of here, like I've done here, we look for the first data piece of data in that's returned. And then we just extract the points. That's the points data inside of the data that's returned about the question. So now I've captured that in this variable here called points. I can now utilize this down here. So what's probably going to happen here is, let's go ahead and create a variable for it here. So we initiate it here. We update it here, and then we use the points down here. Okay. Just looking at this for some reason. Okay. So at the moment, it's suggesting that it's not going to work if you look at the underlines here. So let's just go ahead and give this a go. So I'm going to close the bot. Let's start the bot up again. Okay, so let's try this question. Okay, so clearly there's something wrong here. So let's go back in to our code. So you can see here points equals JSON data 0 points. So key error points. So there's nothing better than a little problem. So this is kind of like thinking, you have to really think about this. What is the problem here? So this is kind of needing you to think back to what we've done in the previous tutorial. Let's go into quiz. Let's go into models. So in our model, we're storing title and points. Difficulty, if we want to, is active, if the question is active or not, created at, updated at. Let's go into the serializer. Now remember, we've got ID, random question here. We've got title and answer. So we're only at the moment gathering the title and all the answers about our model. So what we need to do is we need to also add points. Okay, so it's not going to work unless we add that. So this, remember, was all the data that we want to work with our API. So when we collect data about the question, all we were collecting was the title and the answer. We weren't collecting the points. So we had to update this serializer in order to collect the points also and return the points to our bot when we request a question. So now I should have points. So let's just try this again. So I've turned it on. Let's ask for a new question. So 3. So this time it looks like maybe another problem. Okay, so let's go back. So we still got this name error. Points is not defined. So let's see if we can resolve this. Okay, so maybe you paused and had a look. So the problem is here. If we move down, this get question, we're only returning the question and the answer. So we're also going to need to return the points. So we need to update this to return the points. Okay, so once that we've done that, we're now returning the points when we run this down here. You can see what we're doing is we're collecting the question and the answer, but we now also need to collect the points. So let's bring that down here as points. So we're now collecting all these items here from this function, from our function get question. So now we've done that, we should now have, you can see now the points are now, it's being referenced correctly and being collected correctly. So let's now go ahead and try to run the bot again. Okay, so let's go back in. So this time should be good. Okay, so you can see our new string here. Xander got it right. 1 point plus 1 point. Maybe you want to change that slightly. So let's go back into our database. Do a refresh. So you can now see it is updated, but it says user. Okay, so that's interesting. So there it should say the username. So let's have a look at our code. Right, so what we're sending across then, so let's just double check what we're sending. So the user is guest author, so we're sending the user back to update the score. Okay, so the user's coming into here. You can see what's happening here. Notice that I'm using a string here, or trying to use a string and not the actual user variable. So that's why there was a problem, because I converted to a string. I didn't update it, so it still is just going to print user or utilize the string user. So now I've done that. Let's go back into here. Let's just remove all of this stuff. Start again. So let's restart the bot. Control C, start the bot. So now let's go back in and see if this works. So it should work. We've pretty much done everything now I think we need to do. So apples. So let's go back in and refresh, and there we go. So you can see here, like I said earlier, that this user is actually hashtag 5322. So there are another 5,322 Xanders in Discord, and you can see how many points. So now what we want to test to see if the user's points increases if they answer another question correctly. So let's try that. There we go. So Xander's got now 2 points, hopefully. So let's refresh. And you can see that that isn't working. Right. So let's go back in. Let's go into here. Okay, so there's no indication here that there's a problem. So notice that we don't have any error message at all. So clearly this isn't working. The points isn't incrementing at all. Now, let's go back into our views then. So this is going to be the score and then the views. So up the top here, what you'll notice is we used F here. Now, if I highlight over here, it says undefined variable. So clearly there was a problem there all the time. So this is a function that I need to bring in. So what you're going to need to do here is actually import it in. So this is from the Django DB models. So this is a function which you can look up called F function. So now I've done that, this piece of code should now be working. So I don't need to restart the bot because this code isn't related to the bot. So let's just go back in and answer another question. Right, so now when we check the scores and refresh, still not working. Okay, so let's have a look to see if there's any issues. So it doesn't look like there's any issues at all. Nope. Okay, so here it gets tricky because everything looks like it's okay. So how can we kind of diagnose something like this? So I suppose what we want to do is we can check to see what's actually being sent across. So let's just run a print, for example, here. And what we can do is let's just get the serializer data. Let's just print out what's actually being returned because maybe the data isn't being returned correctly. So we can do that. So let's go back into our bot and let's just run a question. Let's run a question. Come on. There we go. So apples, correct. So now we can go back to our console. And you can now see that we've got some errors here. Cannot resolve keyword point into the field. Choices. Oh, okay. Choice are ID, name, and points. So this is just a classic example of forgetting an S or including an S when you don't need to. So let's go back to the model. It's points. Okay, so that is the field name. Go into our serializer is points. So that's the second point we're looking at. And then in the views, so notice here that we're referencing point and not points. Okay, so that's the field name, points, right? So now we've got that in place. It says points here. That looks like it's going to work. So just check points equals points. Yep. So everything should say point and not point. Right, so now we've got that in place. Let's try it one more time. Okay, so now let's go back in and refresh. And there we go. So everything is lined up. So all those problems I've gone through are pretty much the majority of problems that you're probably going to come into contact with or at some point may happen. So there's a few things you can see there that I've tried to do. So I do hope it was more valuable there being problems rather than just going through it step by step and everything was okay, because I'm assuming that someone's always going to have a problem. It's better for us to be prepared to try and figure out solutions. It does make sometimes a tutorial harder to view, but the code base is in the GitHub repository. If you want to, if you're not too sure, or if you've made a mistake and you can't resolve, just copy and paste if you're following the tutorial step by step. And that may help you in some respects overcome some of the problems. Some ways it doesn't help because you won't work out what the problem is, but the code is there to help you as well. So for the last step, now let's think about actually displaying when or on request. For example, we're going to say score, and then that's going to show us a list of maybe the top 10 users and their scores. So kind of a top 10 list. So let's now implement that into our system. Right, so what we're going to need here is probably a new function. We can start here, yeah. Function, this is going to be get score. Okay, so let's just set that up to begin with. Right, so that's our new function for that. So what we can do here, a bit further down. So this is the on message. So this event here is waiting for messages. So if message content starts with a question, so what we want to do here now is if message content starts with $score, obviously now we're going to show the score, right? So that's our function. Oh, sorry, our statement there that's going to capture and do something if the user types in score. Right, so we're jumping ahead a little bit, but what we can do first, let's go into the score and let's go into, oh no, okay, let's go into our URLs. Let's start off with a URL because we're going to need to collect data like we've done with the question. So we're going to need a point in which we can get the data from. So let's go and let's add a new path here. So path, that's going to be API/score scoreboard, or should we say leaderboard. There we go. So we've got our leaderboard, and we're going to create a new function called leaderboard. Okay, and then we'll just give this a name equals leaderboard. Right, so I'm going to need a comma right there. So that's that in place. So this doesn't exist yet, of course. So let's just bring that in from our views. So that's the data point where we're going to get the information about the top 10 users and their scores. So let's go into now our score and our views. So let's go ahead now and build a new class. So this is going to be the leaderboard. And then what we're going to do here, let's zoom in. We're going to override get. So we're going to be sending a get request. So we take all the data in here and we're going to run this query. So score from score database objects, so we're going to collect all the data and then we're going to order it. We're going to order it by points. Okay, so in this case, we're going to order it descending, so top to bottom. And then what we're going to do is we're going to slice the top 10, for example. Right, so here we're going to slice and only return the top 10. So once we've done that, we can then go ahead and bring in our serializer. So we're going to run this data through our serializer, and then we're then going to return that data. Okay, so that's how we're going to collect the top 10. We're going to run this query here. Essentially, that's the core part here. Run it against our serializer and then return it. Right, so now we've got that. I guess what we can try and do now is just run this against Postman to test to see if we're returning the right data. So let's grab our URL. It's going to be this right here. So let's bring in our Postman here. Let's set this up. So this is our endpoint. Now let's remember it's a get request. Let's send. So it looks like there's a problem, which is fine. So just make sure that the server's on. There we go. So let's run this again. And this time you can see that I've only returned one item. If you don't have a lot of data, let's just add a few more in. So I'm just going to add a few more in. I'll stop here and I'll see you in a second. Okay, so I've added a few more. You can see that we've got a different amount of points. So let's just go ahead and run that again. So we'll send that again. And this time you can see that it's running in descending order here from top to bottom. So the highest is going to be at the top, lowest will be at the bottom. Now, obviously you can add more here and try out that slice, but you can see what's going to happen. We're going to return the top point earners, users. So let's now go back into our code. So I think we're now ready. The data is now prepared. So we'll need to go back into our bot now, and we need to kind of collect that data. So we can just reuse what we have down here. Let's just reuse here. So this is a request get. So let's use that first. So we're going to get, in this case, we need to remember where we're going to get the data from. So is our leaderboard. So we just need to update this here to our leaderboard. So that's going to get the data when we request it. And now what we need to do is we're going to need to print this out. So similar to what we've done here, we're probably going to need to build a loop to loop through those items, to add them to a variable, and then we can output that in the message area. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, so this is how it's going to work. We have this function getScore. We're going to need to store the leaderboard. So that's going to store the leaderboard 1 to 10, all the users. And then we're going to need an ID. So in the leaderboard, we have ID 1, ID 2, ID 3, etc. So we have a list of users 1 to 10, for example. Right, so we know that we need a response. So we're going to get the data here from our endpoint, which we set up on Django. So that's going to return the data. Then what we're going to do is we're just going to use JSON loads just to make it into the data more palatable and easier to work with. And then from there, we're going to get that data and we're going to create a loop. So what if we look back, what gets returned here, this is what gets returned, this data here. So we're going to loop through each item and extract this out and prepare it to be then printed out in the comment section. So let's loop through this. So what we're going to do here is leaderboard plus equals. So we're going to add this to this variable here, string ID. So that equals 1 plus concatenate empty string. So we want a space plus concatenate the item. So for each time we loop around, the data goes into this item here, and then we can utilize, in this case, the name. So we're going to extract a name there, plus concatenate, then the string, which is going to be a dot. Okay, so name dot, and we don't actually need that dot. That could just be a space, I guess. And then string points. So at the end here, we've got this new line. So basically that's going to create, for each time it loops around, it's going to create a new entry in our variable, and that's going to then build the list of users to print out in the comments. Right, so each time we loop around, we add 1 to ID, so we can keep a running order of all the users, and then we're going to return this data across. So that's the leaderboard data. So we're going to send that back and then print it out. So in 55, line 55, here we go. So if the message starts with score, what we're going to do is we're going to get that variable, our function, store the leaderboard. Yep. And because that's what gets returned, the leaderboard. So we store it in this new variable called leaderboard, and then we basically just print it out. So we send to the channel the leaderboard, and that should print out the leaderboard. Okay. So let's go back into our channel. Let's try this out. You can see it's already working. So there we go. So we now have our leaderboard. We can see 1, 2, 3, 4. These are all the IDs. So in first place is test 3 with 1,100 points, and so on all the way down. So you can see here that I'm actually printing out the full user. That could be edited very easily just to kind of either enter the username of the user, or maybe just filter this out, because it's always going to be hash something. So we could just cut that out potentially. So for now, we're just going to keep that in. You can see that we've got this nice list now. Anyone can have a look at any time the score, the current score. Right, so something else we probably want to change so that we can allow other people to interact. I guess this is completely optional. Like I said before here, what we're doing is the user that starts the question is the only user that can actually answer the question. So that's the case at the moment. So what we can do here in actual fact is just change this if you want to allow other people to answer the question, of course. So we could just do something simple like just check for the digit. So return content is digit equals true. If it is a digit, then we're going to basically stop the timer. It gets answered. They've answered the question. So you can make that change as well. So again, now assuming that you did follow the last tutorial or you have these files here, everything is now set up already for Heroku. So all we're going to do now is we're going to create or just update this for Heroku. So I'll go through the whole process again. You don't need to, you just need to add all the new items in Git here, then commit. And if you're already logged in, etc., you can just run the push and that will just update everything to where you were in the previous tutorial. But I'll just quickly run through this again. We'll build a new Heroku app. So we're going to need to initialize, because we haven't initialized, this is something I've downloaded again, so we haven't initialized this with Git. So what we're going to do here is we're just going to stop our bot, and now we're just going to upload this to Heroku. Now, I'm making the assumption again that you saw the previous tutorial that you've got the Heroku CLI installed for Windows. If you haven't, install Heroku CLI, and that's then going to allow you to type in Heroku commands here. You're also going to need to install Git, so download Git so that we can make Git repositories out of this folder and then utilize that repository to send it to Heroku to then actually create or upload the application to the Heroku service. So if you haven't logged into Heroku, it's a free service to utilize. There is paid services, but you can utilize it for free for this. So go ahead and do that if you haven't already. And that's pretty much all you need to do. Like I said, you need to download the Heroku API or CLI, sorry, and also the Git. You need to download Git as well. So I may as well quickly show you, right? So CLI install, go to the first link, download and install. It's going to take you through the process of Windows right there. Now, the good thing about this is there's a link here to the Git installation. So you just need to click that and look for the Windows installation, which is further down here, install that, and then you'll probably need to restart Visual Studio Code. That'd be important before you can then utilize it here. So what we need to do is just make sure we're in the right directory. This is our directory. We just run these commands. I've already laid them out for you. So we're going to initialize a new Git package. Bam. So we do have a git ignore file here. So you can see these gray items here, they're being ignored. So we're not going to package that up, which is all good. All right. So now we just need to git add to add all these files to our repository. Okay, no problem. And then we can go ahead and just commit. There we go. So we committed now that to our repository. All good. So now we can go ahead and log into Heroku. So this should open up, if you're not logged in, a new window. You can see here it says it's going to open up a browser window. So it's going to look a little bit like that. Just press login. Okay, so you'll receive a message here in the terminal saying that you're logged in. So once you've done that, you need to then run create. So now we're going to create a new space to store our new application here. So that's going to create a new app. Now what we can do here in actual fact is record this. So we're going to need to keep this. I'm going to copy this because what we need to do now, oh, actually all of this. So because what we're going to need to do now is go back into our bot and just update this with the new address. So this is going to be careful not to have doubles or not to forget the slashes in the right place. So that gets updated. And then this one also gets updated. So there's just 3 that needs to be updated. So that's now going to be the endpoints. That's where our application is going to reside, plus the extension. Right, so now we know that, we can now go ahead, go back into our notes, and now we can push it across. Now this is only going to work because I've already set everything up. So I've got a proc file here. I've got a static file with some nothing inside. And also I've set it up in the previous tutorial in the settings as well. So this is already set and ready to go, this code that was downloaded. Yours is going to be maybe slightly different if you're not following it. So just to double check, you need this proc file. That's number 1. You need a folder here, maybe with nothing inside of it. It needs to be something because otherwise we can't utilize that in a Git package. So just make sure the folder has a file called text with nothing inside of it. The third thing in the settings, what you're going to need to do at the bottom here is just make sure you've set these 2 variables here, right? So that's pretty much all you're going to need to do to get this working. The proc file as well, just make sure you've got that right. And then once you've done that, you should be able to push this across. Now, in addition to that, in settings, I might as well just note that you're going to also need to add .heroku app. So just copy what's here. Okay, so you can see what's happening now. It's building it on the Heroku server. It's installing all the requirements. So you're going to need a requirements file as well if you don't have one. So you can see that that looks like it's working okay. So actually, it's failed. So there's a collect static issue. So let's have a look to see if we can solve this problem. So this does give us enough information here. So there's an error while running this command. So this command is trying to run on the server and there's an error. So if we were to try and run that command here, let's see what happens. So you can see that we've got an error. So it says here, cannot import score. Check that quizbot.score apps score config.name is correct. So in actual fact, there's a problem here potentially. So in the score, so let's go into score and apps. Now, this is the problem, right? So we didn't name this correctly here. So we either delete this file or we just need to update this with quizapp.score. So that's similar to what we've done in the quiz here, in the apps, quizbot.quiz. So we're just updating this name. Right, so with that in place, we can then try the collect static again. Okay, so check that quizbot score. So cannot import quizapp.score. Okay, so let's have a look again. So that was definitely one of the issues. But let's go into settings. Quizbot.score. So it looks like it's okay there. So let's just make sure everything is saved by closing everything. Let's just try and run that again. Okay, so in properly config, can I import quizapp.score? So let's just go into score. Let's get rid of the file called app.py. Okay, so we can do the same here, apps.py here. So let's just get rid of this file. So that's in the quiz and the score. So we've removed those files. Let's now go ahead. Let's update. So what we need to do, let's go into our file here. Because we've made updates, we're going to need to just, let's run the ad again. Okay, and then once we've done that, let's run the commit. Okay, so there's some changes that we've made. We've committed those changes. So now we're going to, we already logged in. We've already created what we need. So let's just go ahead now and git push this over. So we're going to try again now and rebuild. So this is going to take a couple of seconds. So you can see the process again. It's going through this process of installing everything. So that's going to take a couple of seconds. And see, it's collecting. Successful here. It's built gunny horn. So we're waiting for the collect static. So this time you can see that it's worked. The collect static is now worked. So now we can move across. So it's now compressing. And that's pretty much it. Once we get to this point, as long as the proc file's correctly configured, we should be okay. So what we can do now is just wait a couple of seconds. And then what we're going to do, you can see here, we're going to actually go into our server by utilizing Heroku and then run bash. So that's going to basically connect to our server. It's going to provide us a command prompt here on the server. So this is actually now in the server when we type commands. Because what we want to do, remember, is run Python. Oh, sorry, let's just run ls to list all the items. So you can see this is the items that are on our server now. This is all being collected here, sent across. So we want to run our bot. So bot.py. So that's going to run our bot. Oh, sorry, Python bot.py. So that's going to run our bot on the server. So now we can go back in. Let's just double check. We're not running yet. So we're going to close our local server because we don't need that anymore. And then remember, we don't need to run the bot here. It's now run on the server. So let's go back into our, let's go back into here. Let's just have a look. Score. You can see it's running. So let's run in question. So this is all running from the server now. Apples. There we go. So my score now should be 2. So when I type in score again, it should now say 2 for me, or 3. So it was 2. It's now 3. So it's updating. So we have now everything in place working. Okay, so you might have thought that was a little bit messy. For beginners, that's pretty complicated potentially. The way I was kind of moving around very quickly and the amount of problems I had. And I have tried to make it intentional. Sorry, there was lots of problems there. It may have made things a little bit more complicated by the fact it wasn't very smooth. But we've learned more by looking at all those problems and trying to fix them. So if you do have a problem, you can't get yours working, have a look at the code first in the repository. Everything is working. I will update the repository if you find a mistake, a problem, an error, a bug, then I will fix it and get it updated. So have a look there first before you ask a question at the code. Try and follow it line by line, and hopefully it will work okay. But thank you very much for listening. Hopefully that was useful, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial.